want to welcome everyone to the Roanoke Valley.net user group virtual meetup. This is a first for us, and we're going to be doing this for the next few months until we feel more comfortable with, the dangers of COVID-19 and whatnot. So, but I'm very glad to be able to meet with you guys today and, see some familiar faces and have a meetup together. Today's presentation we have for you guys is a fantastic presentation, JavaScript worker processes, communications, and storage features by Sam Nasr. Sam has been a software developer since 1995, focusing mostly on Microsoft technologies. He's a senior software engineer with NIS Technologies, where he consults, teaches clients about their latest .NET technologies. Sam has achieved multiple certifications from Microsoft, including MCSA, MCAD, MCTS, and MCT, and is the leader of the Cleveland C# and VB.NET user group since 2003. That's very impressive. In addition, he's the leader of the .NET study group, and author for Visual Studio Magazine, and 5-time Microsoft MVP. When not coding, Sam loves spending time with his family and friends or volunteering at his local church. Thank you very much, Sam, for being with us and presenting today. I'll let you explain the format of the questions with the group. So with that, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Tolga. Appreciate you having me and appreciate the introduction. As Tolga mentioned, basically, as far as the forum, feel free to jump in at any point in time with questions, either verbally or in chat. If I miss catching your question in chat, hopefully someone will stop me and we can address that as we're going forward. Although we're all kind of in lockdown and having to resort to Zoom, let's try to make it as much of a roundtable discussion as much as possible. So please don't hesitate. The only stupid question is the one not being asked. So feel free to fire away. So let's go ahead and get started. Since Tolga did a great job with the introduction, I will skip this slide and we'll jump right into it. So one of the things we're going to be discussing tonight are web workers. And what that is basically it's a script running in the background, independent of other scripts that are running in our web page. JavaScript is typically, or by standard, running one thread. And so by utilizing web workers, we're essentially able to utilize concurrency and get that effect of having multiple threads running, even though technically it's only one thread that's actually performing. So it does not affect the performance of the page. Things are running in the background. And it does have access to APIs such as navigation, geolocation, but it has no access to the DOM directly. So it's used for concurrency, and we can have, there are essentially two types of workers. There's the dedicated, and then there's the shared worker. And we can have it run in an isolated thread. And essentially it's a boss-worker relationship where the boss will instantiate the process it'll call on message, and then the worker will reply back using the post message method. And so these are event handlers that we're going to be using in our code, where the boss will be sending a message to the worker will do some processing, and then we'll send it back to the boss. So let's jump into a demo, because I strongly feel the best way to explain something is to actually demonstrate it. So we'll take a look at a simple web page that I created, and let me go ahead and maximize my screen. I assume the font is okay for everyone. If not, please let me know. So we have a standard HTML web page, and we have a paragraph element here with an output element that's just going to be empty, and we're going to give that an ID of result. So this is going to post our result inside this element. And then when we get started, we're going to make a call to a method called start worker. Sorry, we have two buttons rather. When we click the button called start worker, it will start the worker method as seen here. When we click the stop worker, that will also call the stop worker method. And what these functions are, they are defined in a script below, and they're inside of our embedded script. We have the start worker and we have the stop worker underneath. So what start worker does, first it checks to see that the browser does in fact support the worker process. And it checks to see that the type of worker is not undefined, meaning that the browser does support it. And if it does support it, then we check to see that this variable W, which is what we defined up here, that it is currently undefined. And if that's the case, we're going to instantiate it, and we're going to utilize the worker method, and we're going to point it to a worker proc1.js file. So let's temporarily jump to the worker proc1.js file. And what we see here is that we have a function that basically it's going to increment I with 1, and then it's going to post a message back to the boss, and it's going to send that message. And then it's going to wait a half a second and then re-execute that method again. So here we see that it's calling timed count, which is essentially a recursive call into that method. And it's going to do it every 500 milliseconds or every half second. So going back into our HTML, once we instantiate that process, we set our event handler. And what this is going to do, it's going to capture the on message event. And what it's going to do is going to execute this inline function, which all it does is it's going to retrieve the element result. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. It's going to retrieve the data from the event object, which is coming back, is being passed into the event handler. And then it's going to populate the inner HTML of result. And result is that HTML element that we have up here in our code. Okay. So again, we have an empty result HTML method. We have 2 buttons here. Once we start it, it goes through here, instantiates the worker proc1.js. We set the event handler to handle messages coming back from the worker process, and then we display it on the page. And then on the opposite end, when we go to click the stop worker, what that's going to do is it's going to call the terminate method on the variable W, which is our worker process. And then we're going to set it to undefined because now we want to terminate it and remove it from memory. So when we go ahead and execute that page, we have, let's close this. And let's open it up in Chrome or Edge. And there our status is just an empty HTML element. And we have our 2 buttons, start worker and stop worker. Once we go ahead and start, basically it's making a call to the worker proc, and the worker proc is taking that I variable, incrementing it, and then sending it back. And all the work is essentially done by the 2 event handlers that we've seen here. So we have the start worker as the function that gets everything set up. We have the on message. This is what basically handles messages coming back from the worker proc. And then the worker proc calls the post message to send messages back to the boss. Okay. And as you see, it's completely running in the background. And I think there it is. So you see it continues to increment without interrupting the page. Obviously, it's not a very fancy page, but it's kept that way for demonstration purposes. And then once I click the stop worker, then everything terminates and we halt at that number that we stopped it at. Okay. I have a feeling I kind of rushed through it, so I wanted to stop for a minute and see if you have any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
One, I think this is really cool. I didn't know this existed yet, so this is kind of cool. And I'm thinking about ways to do it. What I am curious though, trying to break it, what happens if you start the worker and then you refresh the page? Does the browser throw that away and reload it new, or is there a way to persist the worker even beyond page refresh?
So if you look at the code, what's going to be happening is basically it's going to reload it again. but we can give it a shot and actually see what happens. So if I refresh the page here, basically we start at 0.
Yep.
And I start the worker process, and while it's in the middle of running, I refresh, and now essentially it's reloading everything. So it did away with everything that was running.
That was my assumption. I was just curious to see if I could start a worker thread that could persist, multiple page requests. Obviously you just control navigation yourself, but yeah.
Yeah, because keep in mind, it is essentially JavaScript, so it's running on the client. And when you refresh, you're doing away with everything there. Now there is, if you're interested in doing something like that, you can utilize storage, which I'll talk about later. And you can take this variable that's being executed here, and it could be a varchar string value or what have you. You could store it in temporary storage, and then when the page reloads, you can check temporary storage. If there's anything there, pick up that value and continue processing.
Sam, quick question. Could
Sure.
you capture the refresh event and say like, are you sure to refresh because that will break your application? Or
So an event handler for
Yeah.
the refresh?
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably should be able to do that. I don't know the code or the API for doing that off the top, but I'm sure it can be done.
Okay. So that would prevent it then, yeah.
That's one way of doing it, but essentially everything is at the user's control, right? If they decide to overwrite it anyways, then things could be gone. Well, I'm glad you guys like it so far. Any other questions?
So today, what are some of the, what drove the need for this? And I guess my mind's thinking, your chat bots and stuff like that, but we've kind of got ways of getting around that now. And I'm thinking simulation. If I wanted to run a simulation, this would be great.
Well, I mean, essentially, there's always a need for running something in the background and having it process. So it could be where you're doing a complex calculation, and so you're kind of parking that off to the side, letting it work in the background, and then render the results when it's completed. Keep in mind, again, it's a very simplified solution for demo purposes.
Yeah.
And so all we're doing is just incrementing by 1 and passing it back. If it was a complex formula, I don't know, for calculating a person's bonus for a specific quarter, or you're possibly doing forecasting for stocks where there's a lot of processing and things happening for every stock that you're going through, that would take a lot of chugging, and you'd want to put it in the background.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind me talking. I just, I'm thinking about this. What I've done in the past, I offload it to the server, right? And I have a very powerful server and maybe do load balancing or microservices there using AJAX calls. I guess this now distributes it along all the clients. As long as their browser supports it, then you've actually taken advantage of more processing and taking the load off your server now.
You're absolutely right, and you touched on 2 key points there. 1, you're offloading it to the client, and 2, you could be putting the calculation over on the server, but keep in mind, because this is JavaScript and it's running on the client, essentially all that code is being downloaded to the client. So if it's a formula for calculating bonuses, I could look it up in my browser and see what that code is, for example. So security would then become an issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely helpful in offloading it to the browser and letting the client take it from there. Another key point that you touched on is we have to make sure that the browser, in fact, does support it. And that's the first thing that I'm checking for here, right? Because not all browsers support all features, unfortunately.
How many browsers support this? I mean, obviously Edge, Chrome, Firefox will probably support it. Is it been implemented by enough of the modern ones that I could get away with it if I had a controlled environment?
So Firefox does support it. I'm not sure if Chrome does, but I can take a quick peek. Yeah, Chrome does not.
Oh, wow.
Surprisingly.
Okay. Wow. Interesting.
Isn't that also because it's a local JavaScript? There was always problems with Chrome and local JavaScript.
Yeah, so I think if we were to go and inspect, we're going to see an error message here. Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at, can I use .com for web workers, and it shows that it supports it as a version 86, or actually, no, it supports it from, wow, Chrome supported it since.
Yeah, Chrome has really strict rules about when you load HTML files from disk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It must be a caveat of how, when, you know, how you use it in Chrome. But it's supposed to support it.
Interesting.
Yeah, there are, again, there's different caveats with every browser. So you'd have to do a workaround to get it to work into Chrome. And this might be a shocker, but it doesn't work in Internet Explorer. I should mention that off the top.
Yeah, my browser of choice.
Right. Okay. Any other questions regarding web workers?
No, but just to jump on Alan's use case, I mean, you just now demonstrated with one web worker, but you could have like 100 web workers doing all kinds of different things and letting things happen on the page as they return their results. I'm thinking.
Right, now keep in mind that you're obviously occupying CPU horsepower on the client's machine.
Yeah.
So you can certainly spawn off more processes, but you got to take that into consideration as far as performance.
Yeah.
And going along those lines, let me close down this browser and that one, and we'll open up another demo. Pardon the background noise. Okay, so here I have a demo where I have a worker process, both 1 and 2. And it's very similar to the first demo that we had seen, except now I essentially duplicated the work. And so if we take a look at the HTML for that, so it's very similar to the original HTML that we had seen earlier, except everything's been duplicated. We have 2 result output elements. We have 2 sets of buttons. And likewise in the script, I have a start worker 1 and a start worker 2. Aside from that, everything else is the same. I'm doing my check to see that the worker process is supported in that specific browser. I then have 2 worker variables, W1 and W2. I check to see that they're not instantiated. And if they're not, then I launch worker proc 1 and worker proc 2. And again, whoops, this is what the worker proc is. It's just a timed count, executes every half second, and then does a recursive call. So the point of this demo is if I was to execute it, I can start worker 1, wait a bit, and then start worker 2, and you see that there's no conflict there. They're running independently of each other. Likewise, I can stop worker 2, and then worker 1 just keeps on chugging. So it allows me to have multiple processes. I can run them concurrently without stepping on each other. But again, you want to be careful with launching several processes on a client's machine. Okay. Any questions?
Cool.
I'm sorry?
I said, pretty cool. That's, I mean, the aspect of, you know, running multiple things in the background.
Yeah, it would definitely come in very handy in some applications.
Is this the next hot virus hack of taking people's web browsers down? Just loading up as many web workers as you can get going.
I can neither deny nor confirm that statement.
I'm sure I hear about, you know, many sites, you know, mining for Bitcoin in the background.
JavaScript, wow.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Wow.
It's a thing.
All right. so let's shut this down, and we'll close this and this, that too, and then we'll go back to our PowerPoint. All right, so next on the agenda are WebSockets. And what WebSockets are, it's basically a standard that allows for bi-directional TCP communication between the client and the server. So direct communication can go both ways. And it provides a low-level interface for that communication, both sending and receiving. When compared with HTTP, HTTP essentially is the protocol where I can send one message and then I'm done. However, using WebSockets, basically I'm keeping that socket open and I have bi-directional communication or full duplex. I can do both send and receive repeatedly. So it operates over a single socket exposed via the JavaScript interface, and this was introduced in HTML5. So obviously it's supported by most browsers. The server would have to be built in some kind of another application, either Node.js or C# or some other higher level language. And essentially what we're doing is we're instantiating the connection using the WebSocket method, and then we pass in a URL or a URI, excuse me, and then we specify WS as the protocol as opposed to HTTP. And if we want to do a secure WebSocket, it's WSS, similar to HTTPS. So the URI essentially is where we're going to have that server process stored, and that's going to be responding to our communication from the client. So the socket starts over an HTTP handshake, and then after the handshake, essentially either party can send or receive data. So it offers low latency and almost real-time communication between the client and the server. So this would be useful for chat applications or having multiplayer online games. Also live sports ticker where the scores are constantly being updated. All stock tickers as well, and social media. So where like we've all seen on Facebook or Twitter, where you're constantly getting a stream of comments or replies regarding a specific item. So in comparison to AJAX, where this has its strengths is that it's low latency, it's full duplex, bi-directional communication, and it's long running, meaning it's not a one and done type of send message, but it can be continuously running in the background. The advantage of AJAX is that it's been around for a much longer period of time, and it's widely accepted in various frameworks because, again, it's been around for a much longer period, as well as browsers, and it's more used by developers in general. So let's take a look at demo of WebSockets, and let's go up the level, and there's WebSockets. All right, so let's open this up in Visual Studio Code. And there we see a sample web page where we're going to have 3 buttons: open connection, send message, and then close connection. Because this is a demo, like I said, the server process that we're communicating with has to be established on the server. So this is a sample process that I'm utilizing with echo.websocket.org. And there we see that if I want to do a secure URI, I specify the WSS protocol as opposed to the non-secure WS protocol. So there's my URI. And then if we scroll down, we see that essentially we're establishing the connection. So whenever we open the connection, we're establishing the connection using the WebSocket API call. And then from there, we have several event handlers that we're putting in place for on open, on close, on message, and then in case an error occurs, then that message or that method would fire. So let's take a look at it in action, and we'll go ahead and fire that up. So we'll open the connection. I get the message that it's connected to the server. And with this process that's running on the server, all it's doing is essentially echoing back the message that's being sent to it. So I sent this message. The current date time is 5/11/2020. And there you see the date time format is day/month/year. And likewise, I get the same message back in the response. And this can continue to happen over and over again. I send the message, I get a reply, constantly back and forth. If I close the connection, there I see that it's disconnected. Now I'm going to send the message, and there's nothing coming back. So going back to the code, we already saw the on open, and there's the open connection method. Whenever we're sending a message, we're just formatting our date time, and then we make a call to do send, and then that sends it to the server, and then the response, there we see an on message, and that method is defined right here. And all it does is basically it captures the event data that's coming back. We retrieve the data property from the event data, and then we update the HTML with a response. So we just write out to the screen that the response is whatever is stored here. So basically, the communication is bi-directional. We can continue to send and receive without issue, up until the connection is closed, of course.
Sam, where is that do send message method defined?
So that is defined here. So there's the do send.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And all it's doing is, again, it's making a call to the WebSocket and it's sending the message there. So it's an inline function here, essentially.
Yeah. Okay.
So what would the benefit of this be in this mode? So this is more of the client still initiating the message. So why not just do a regular regular call, live WebSockets? Why not just call the REST API every time?
In this example, keep in mind that the client is the one that initiates that initial open.
Mhm.
After that, anybody can send and receive. It's a free-for-all, essentially, right? It's just
Right.
that with this demo, with that URI process, it's sitting on the server, and because it's available for everyone as a demo, it essentially responds back with whatever you send it. So it is not always a tit for tat, but rather once you open communication, then anybody can send and receive at any point in time.
See, I foresee using this for something like live share. So if I'm allowing data entry and multiple people can edit the same object at the same time, right? When one person updates something on a screen, the other person's looking at the same screen, they see it updated immediately.
Exactly.
And the obvious question I'm going to ask, because I don't actually know the answer to this, is how many connections can the server have at one time open?
I believe 1024, but I have to dig into the documentation to be certain.
Does it do anything to fake that? I thought I saw a headline at one point in time. I think it might have been more towards Signal R, where it would round, if it got full, it would round robin sockets, checking on them. That way it can open up multiple. I don't know. I might be dreaming.
I'm not sure I understand the question fully.
So if I have like a game and it's a remote online game that's, you know, doing something, and I've got 2,000 users, and I start to run out of sockets.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember. It was more than a year ago, so I'm obviously not thinking straight. So I'll retract my question and ask more appropriate questions in the future.
Well, I mean, like if you're a big, you know, big retailer or something, and you know you have a bunch of people, you can meet your web page, and you put something on there that can do this. I mean, how would you handle like? Yeah, exactly. Like you were saying, it's only limited to like 1024 or something. So if you have 10,000 users that go to that part of your web page that opens up WebSocket, that's going to be a problem, I guess, right?
Well, it would be per server. So essentially you need a server cluster there to handle multiple users.
Okay.
That many multiple users, I should say.
Yeah. And actually, I was just thinking, Tolga mentioned blockchain. If I had a blockchain viewer that was viewing the most recent up-to-date blocks and refreshing, it might be easier to have a WebSocket sending that data to me instead of me requesting it every couple of seconds or milliseconds.
Right. Yeah, there is no request happening here. It's just the client that initiates the opening of the connection. And then, like I said, it's a free-for-all. Whoever can communicate with the other.
I wonder what happens in the background, like the TCP layer. Is it really just waiting for the server to send something back, and it's like not chatty at all, or is it in reality like, are you alive? Are you alive? Are you alive? Like, is there a bunch of chatter that has
Is there
to happen?
polling going on? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or like something, keep alive or something that has to constantly happen to keep that socket open, or is it really just very quiet, so it's actually really low bandwidth?
So to be absolutely certain, I probably have to install Fiddler and monitor it, but I think it's pretty quiet. We just maintain the connection. There is no polling that's happening. But as far as anything sporadic every so often to keep alive, I think Fiddler would be the answer here.
Mm-hmm. Or Wireshark or something.
Something
Yeah.
like that, right?
Very cool. It's very easy. I mean, I didn't realize it was this easy to enable that. That's very cool.
Yeah, and it's all built in. I didn't download any additional libraries. It's all within standard JavaScript. And surprisingly, this came out with HTML5, which I think was out in, 2011? And still not many people know about it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but SignalR uses this, right?
I don't know for sure.
It does. So SignalR is actually an abstraction on top of this.
Okay.
And so if you have browser support for this, it'll use it. But if you don't, it'll use older methods like pulling AJAX stuff.
Cool. I've used SignalR. Shame on me for not knowing more of the details underneath it. But I was under the assumption it used something like WebSockets. And I knew it did something with older browsers. I just didn't trust it, so I didn't use older browsers.
Understandable.
So one question, how do you go about enabling this on the server then? Say I'm running ASP.NET web server, or I got an ASP.NET application. How do I go about enabling that on this server? And not code example or anything, but do I have to like install a library or something, or can I? Is that a function of IIS or Kestrel or?
It would depend on what you're building it in. Keep in mind, you can build it in a variety of languages. So it would depend on what library you have. And unfortunately, I don't have that demo part of it. But essentially, you would need to be able to make that process available for a call to open the socket and communicate with it. I can send you a link afterwards, but I don't have it on me.
Okay. I wonder if it's like completely out of the paradigm. I mean, is it, or are you still creating controllers and views and stuff like that? It's just somehow handling it, or is it something completely different you'd have to build and you can't have controllers and things?
SignalR makes you write these things called hubs, which are kind of like MVC controllers. So if you're in ASP, so if you're in ASP.NET land, you want to use SignalR for this, unless you're a masochist.
Oh, so you're saying I can implement SignalR on the server and connect to it using WebSockets from the clients?
Yeah, if you use SignalR, and when I describe using SignalR, I definitely mean using it on the server and on the client.
On the client too.
Yeah, it'll use WebSockets to communicate by default.
Gotcha.
I'm sure there's a variety of other libraries as well that would utilize it, but if you're looking to build something low level from the ground up, again, as I think it was Alex that mentioned, if you like to torture yourself, then, you know, or if you just want something where you're minimizing the code, then this is one way to do it.
Very nice.
I had no idea it was so easy. This is really simple compared to what I would have expected.
Just a simple WebSocket call.
Is there a fallback to if the WebSocket can't be established? And I might be off base here, but I thought we had an issue where in our company, our stores couldn't communicate using WebSockets. Something was, the proxy was somehow blocking it. I don't know if it was intentional or by mistake, or, you know, I think it might be the man-in-the-middle attack that's like somehow severing that direct connectivity. Maybe there was something with WebSockets that we just like WebSockets just wouldn't work. And I want to say it would fall back to using something else, but I don't know if that's something that you have to do yourself manually, like you try the WebSocket call, and if that doesn't work, just do a regular call.
A regular call such as?
I mean, just how you just do a regular, you know, HTTP client kind of thing. Just a AJAX call.
So here, there's an error event handler that I have, but all it's doing is just simply writing out to the screen that an error has occurred. So you could use this as a form that if there's an error, then you could fall back on the alternate method, whatever that method may be, to continue communication.
Just like on an interval, you know, call every 5 seconds instead of having it real time.
Yeah, so again, this is in cases where you need to send communication back and forth. So think of a stock ticker where you enter in the stock symbol, and it's constantly updating you with the change in price, or a specific team, and then getting the score updates. So you can enter in multiple teams at various times, and then just continue to get the stream of data for that.
Right. Without having to constantly ask the server every 5 seconds, hey, do I have an update? Do I have an update? Do I have an update?
How about now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and which is wasteful traffic, you know, you have to.
Yeah, and of course, if you're doing polling like that, then you got to multiply it by the number of users, so it can get pretty ugly pretty quickly. All right. Any other questions or comments regarding this?
So this would be good if you were starting a process on like a remote server and waiting for it to finish.
Yeah, could be used for that. Yeah. The next one that I'm going to show you, the server sent events, that would be used. That would be a better application for that. This is more of communicating with the server, sending messages repeatedly. And with that, let's move on to the next one, which is server sent events. So a server sent event is basically when a page automatically gets updates from a server. So where this is different is that this is one-way messaging, where we're constantly listening in on messages from the server. So this was feasible, and it was possible to do something like that before, but the web pages had to request updates repeatedly, and there was that polling that we were talking about. With server sent events, the updates come automatically as they are available. So think of examples like Twitter, where once I open up my page and I'm logged in, I'm constantly getting updates of all the tweets that are happening, of all the ones that I follow. And again, the same thing can be applicable to stock prices and news feeds. And then the gentleman that mentioned it a minute ago regarding if you're waiting for a process to finish on the server. So this is one good example of it, because again, it's just one-way communication. I just want to find out if the server proc is done or not. I don't necessarily need to communicate back to the server again. And we don't need to have that constant back and forth. It's just one way that I need, and I'm done. So this would be applicable for that. Does that answer your question to whoever asked it? I'm sorry, I didn't see who it was.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good. You're welcome. All right. Next, web storage. So with web storage, this again was introduced with HTML5, where web pages can store data locally within the user's browser. So this was previously done with cookies, and this is a little bit more secure because we're storing it away into the specific storage for that user, and it's tied to our web page. So the data is not included in every server request like a cookie is, but it's only when it's requested through an API call. So it allows large amounts of data to be stored onto the client's machine without having a performance impact. So for example, think when you go to autotrader.com, obviously you're able to buy or look for a variety of different automobiles, right? Different auto manufacturers. So if you go there every time and it downloads that long list, that could take up some time. Whereas opposed to the first time, it'll just download it to the client, store it on there in local storage, and then the next time you go to that page, it will automatically retrieve that from your local storage. So it's in a similar fashion to a cookie, except that it is stored within the browser itself, as opposed to a cookie that's a file onto the client. So the capacity varies basically between 2 to 10 megabytes, depending on the browser. And we store the data using key value pairs. And we'll see how that's done in a minute, but essentially every value, you give it a key, and then it's stored away. There's essentially two types of storage that are being utilized on the browser. There's local storage, which stores the data without expiration. So you can leave the site, turn off your machine, come back a few days later, and there it's stored. The alternative is session storage. And just like the name suggests, it's only alive only for the duration of that session. So if I was to do a refresh or go away for whatever reason, I lose that. Next is GeoLocation. And what GeoLocation is, it's an API that's used to retrieve the user's geographical position on the map. So in order to be able to get the user's location, you obviously need to have their approval first. So a message will always pop up in the browser saying that this website needs to know your location. Do you approve? Yes or no? So it's more accurate for devices with GPSs that are built in. And essentially the way it works is it will query the device through the browser to see if you have a GPS. If not, then it will use the TCP IP connection and identify where you are or get a relative position of where you're at according to your TCP address. We can utilize the get current position method to get the user's position. And with that, you can also utilize an error handler whenever that method fails. So once you make a call to get position, essentially you're going to get coordinates back. And then the coords object will contain a variety of different properties that let you know what the latitude, longitude, the accuracy of the position, again, depending on whether the user has a GPS device or not, the heading, the speeds, and then, of course, the timestamp. Modernizer. How many have worked with Modernizer before? Wow. Okay. So this was a library that came out, again, at the cusp of HTML5 when it was introduced. And the whole purpose of Modernizer is now that we have some browsers using new features, some browsers that don't. So the best way to be able to work with our code is to utilize Modernizer as a library that will automatically detect to see what different capabilities are available in that browser. And so if I want to see if a specific browser supports Canvas, for example, I would make a call to modernizer.canvas. If I want to see if it supports local storage, there you see second from the last bullet point, modernizer.local storage. And so I use that and it will return true or false depending on whether that browser supports that feature or not. What's another way that I can find out if a feature is supported in a browser? Anybody?
Best I got Google.
You can ask Google, but where's Google going to lead you?
Can I use?
Can I use? Right. So that's one website that essentially will tell you what browsers or what features are supported in which browsers. So with that, let's take a look at the remaining demos. So we started talking about the geolocation and web storage. So, and Modernizer as well. So let's take a look at detect browser capabilities. And we're going to open this up with Visual Studio Code. And why is that not giving me that option? All right. Oh, because it's not HTML. How do you like that, huh? There it is. So with Modernizer, again, just like any other JavaScript file, I just simply reference it. So here I'm looking for that specific version of the library. And all I'm doing is I'm checking to see does Modernizer, does this browser support the canvas object? And if it returns false, then I'm going to display the word not followed by supported in this browser. And if it is supported, then obviously this portion will not execute, but then it will just say that canvas is supported in the browser. And we do that for a variety of different features: local storage, audio, geolocation, so on and so forth. Okay. And so if we execute that, we see that running an edge, we see that the canvas feature is supported. However, local storage feature is not supported in this browser. If we take that same page
Wow.
and go to Chrome, we see that it is supported in this browser. So this is a great way to, I'm sorry?
I did not know. I thought local storage was supported by everybody now. I mean, Edge is like latest stuff. So
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Was that
Wow.
Trident Edge or Chromium Edge?
So this is, it's a new install on this machine, so forgive me. Let's minimize that.
Yeah, I think that looks like the older Edge. That might actually not be the new Edge. Yeah, because it's got that UI in the upper left-hand corner.
yeah, 2017 copyright.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I was to upgrade that, I might have better luck.
But there are plenty of people still using this old version of Edge. So
Yeah, it's true.
Sadly, there are still people using Internet Explorer out there, and 6 nonetheless. So
including nuclear power plants.
Oh my God. No.
let's not say that on an open line. Let's just keep it between us. But yeah, I mean, you know, whenever you're catering to the web, you have to be able to cater to a variety of different users. And so this is a great way to find out what you're working with. So let me close that and we'll go back here. All right, so with web storage, actually we talked about geolocation first, so let's do that. So with geolocation, let's take a look at that page. And all I'm doing here is I have a button called get location. And what it's going to do is execute the method get location. And in here, there's my function get location. And it checks to see that the navigator object is supported here. And if so, then it will retrieve the current position. So it will make a call to navigator.geolocation.get current position. And then show position is the event handler that will handle the reply back. And show position is the method down here. And so basically it's going to get a reply, and then we're going to display the latitude and longitude for the current user. If this call fails, if this call fails, then we just simply tell the user that geolocation is not supported by this browser. So let's go ahead and execute that. And we'll get the location. And there you see at the bottom, it's saying that this web page is requesting your location. Do you want to use it? Or do you want to allow it rather? So click yes. And I get nothing. And that's because it's not sure if it's supported here or not, but let's go to Chrome. And same thing. Do I want to allow my location to be known? And so there it comes back with the latitude and the longitude. So then I could take this and paste it into Google, and I could give away my position on the map. And there I am. The red pin just vanished a second ago. Where was it? Let's reload. Okay, so it's giving you a general proximity of where I'm at. And that's because I'm running off of a device that does not have a GPS device on it. It's a PC. And so naturally it's using my address and it's giving you the general proximity of where I'm at. I did that on purpose in case somebody wanted to hunt me down. So I stay hidden.
Somebody was talking about that recently, and I was trying to remember if it was Chrome. It's not. Maybe it was the Apple announcement. They have a way of turning on the location, but only provide like city level information. Like it tells you generally like around what city you're in, but it won't give you any more accurate than that. It won't give you street level accuracy. So you can still, your website still can give relevant information based on the city or whatever you're near, but you don't have to have address level information. Somebody was talking about that feature. I thought it was a really brilliant idea because most web pages, the information they provide is really specific to really like what time zone you're in, what city you're near, what state you're in, that sort of thing. They don't really need to know address level information. So
right. And again, it also depends on the device. Obviously, if I'm running this on my phone, then it has the built-in GPS and it will give an exact location. Now, keep in mind that the coordinates object that comes back, it does have an accuracy property that I can access to find out how specific that location that's coming back and where that user is. Now, a more practical example is if I go to my favorite website of all, Lowe's.com, and so here it automatically detected where I'm at, and it automatically populated with the closest store, which is in a suburb called Strongsville. And so you can use that to automatically route your user to the closest location and kind of expedite things a little bit more. Likewise, if I'm not happy with that location, now it's giving me a much broader area of stores to choose from that I can select. So it's not sending me all the way to New York or some other state. It's keeping me within my region. Any questions regarding geo? I'm sorry, Ron.
Right? Sorry. So if your internet provider or you use some kind of VPN, you can actually show up in a different location.
Yes.
So that kind of screws with location services.
Right. And actually, if you're into travel hacks and getting cheap tickets, they say you should get a VPN while you're searching ticket prices because sometimes they
Really?
offer lower prices for other countries versus coming from the US.
Huh. That's a good tip. Thank you.
But you didn't think you were going to learn that tonight, did you?
It's always a little tidbit of information that you didn't expect, right?
Right, absolutely. Okay.
Joe asked about the user prompt that showed up earlier in both Edge and Chrome.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Like, is that navigator functionality?
That's within the browser itself that will prompt you whether you want to give out your location or not. And so if I was to take this page, let's go here, copy, and I'm going to run incognito. Let me open it up. Now, because I'm running incognito, it doesn't know that I approved my location before, and so it's coming up through the browser. And it's just referencing it as this file or the website, and I can either allow or block it. So short answer, it's coming from the browser itself. And I apologize, I have been doing a poor job of looking in the chat. Okay. All right, I think we got that question covered. Any other questions, either through chat or verbally? Okay, going back to our demo. So we talked about geolocation. And let me see, I had a problem with this one. Let me see if it works now. Copy and take it to Chrome. Yeah, so there's the accuracy. And then 2707, which I believe is in meters. So now you know my latitude and longitudes within 9,000 feet.
Huh,
Give or take.
nice.
That's too big to find you.
Yes.
You underestimate the internet.
Very true. Okay, we talked about geolocation, Modernizer. Web storage, last but not least. All right, let's close down some windows. And let's close that. And let's take a look at web storage. All right, so for web storage, again, another web page here, and I'm utilizing jQuery. And what I'm doing is I'm setting my variable L storage in a function and setting it to window.local storage. And then I check to see that if there's a page load count that's there. And if it's not, I set it to 0. And then I have a button that allows me every time I refresh, I can store it. So here I'm essentially taking that load count and I'm storing it by saying lstorage.page load count and then storing it in local storage. Likewise, I can also do session storage. And it's, again, same context where I'm taking a value, converting it to an integer, and just incrementing by 1, and then displaying that using jQuery on the page. So if we took a look at that page, there it says, and again, I'm running an edge here. So this page accessed 0 times. When I do a refresh, it's not working. Why is that?
Because your version of Edge didn't support local storage.
Exactly. So I'll take that link. I'll go to my Chrome browser, paste. And then as I refresh, you see that both are being incremented one at a time. If I close that browser, and let's close this one too, open up another Chrome browser, a new session, paste. There you see my local storage has been accessed 8 times. But because my session storage is now a new session, it says it's been accessed only 1 time. taking a look at the code again, fairly simple. I have my variable that I'm declaring to either local storage or window.session storage. And then using key value pairs, where I have the storing the name. So page load count, and I'm setting it equal to an integer value. And this is in the L storage or local storage. And then I have a page load count also in the session storage. Okay, and all I'm doing is just incrementing these by 1. Easy peasy. Any questions? None at all?
Is it, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Who wants to flip a coin?
Go ahead,
First.
Alan.
No, one of my projects, we had to use this, and because it was a government agency and they were under lockdown at the time and weren't allowed to gather any user information, but yet they needed to store information about the user. But the hiccup came in if they wanted to share what they were looking at with somebody else, they couldn't do it. Or if they wanted to transition to their laptop or to their phone, you know, local storage was specific to that device.
Right. Specific to that device, specific to the user that's logged in, and specific to that browser as well, assuming the browser supports it. So, you know, when it comes to secure data, I don't know if session storage is the way to go for that, quite honestly. Certainly you can encrypt it and hash it, but in the end, it's still stored on the client's machine. So some caution to be exercised there.
Yeah, I'm slightly freaked out that Edge didn't support it, the first version of Edge, because makes me wonder what they've done.
I'm wondering if it's a setting in Edge that's just turned off on your browser, Sam, because I keep looking at all these settings and cannot use. It says Edge has always supported it, so, well, it says it's been supported since version 12, I guess.
Yeah,
and
let
that's
me,
like,
go ahead.
that's, I think the date of that is, it's been supported since July 28th, 2015, and yours is newer than that.
So I have version 40,
Version, yeah, so
2017.
I mean, appears to be supported. So why is, obviously, you know, Modernizer is also saying enable DOM storage. Is there a setting called enable DOM storage?
The only thing I
see
saw
here.
from Microsoft was that it may be a broken.
So go to advanced settings.
I'm
At
sorry?
the bottom there, advanced settings.
So we could play around with this, but I just wanted to address any questions that, from a conceptual point of view, regarding what we talked about.
So the local
Because this-
storage, you can clear that the same way as you do with cookies, right?
So if you, essentially, yes, you can purge your storage, and that would purge your local and your session storage.
Gotcha.
Can I access another site's local storage? I want to think that that was supposed to have been blocked, but I don't know.
Another site's local storage. So it's going to be stored using key value pairs. So I don't believe you would be able to. I think it's tied to a specific site. close this down. Any other questions? In chat.
Hey, Alan, it actually, the session storage has a different entry per website. So
Yeah.
I-
That's what I was thinking. I was just wondering how hard it'd be to try to hack into another site's. Yeah, I
And you
think
work for the government, Alan?
that JavaScript worker
know-
thread to access another. No.
we know for what part of the government Alan works now.
I mean, essentially anything is hackable, right? But it's just the nature of it and the way it's designed. It's not meant to be cross-referenced from other sites, and for good reason, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's where the GDPR comes in. I'm assuming that if I use local storage, I'm not as concerned about the GDPR as if I was using cookies, because cookies, you can get an idea of what other cookies they have. And that's
Yep.
kind of,
And
Right.
cookies come back to the server. Local storage stays at the customer, so it's nothing the customer is really sharing. It's just being stored for their own benefit, I guess.
Right.
So yeah, there's some benefits there.
You want to
And
store it for things
compliance.
that are not private or confidential data. Thinking back to the example of AutoTrader, where you have 60 some different auto manufacturers that are going to be in your drop-down lists. Multiply those by each manufacturer having 10 different models, multiply by all the various years. So that could be a lot of data that you need to download to the client. So storing it locally would make sense. You're not violating any rights or privacy issues, and you're making the site faster for the user.
And you could even update it with Websockets if you add a different brand or something like that while you're in the session.
Very true. Yeah, I like how you think.
Very cool.
Alan is probably thinking of a way to hack it through websites.
I'm actually the worst hacker in the world. I really am. But it's just, I don't know what got me thinking about it.
No, that's smart thinking. Actually, security should always be in the forefront, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think
All
it's
right.
handled by the browser, isn't it? The separation of the different sites.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Sorry, the local storage and the session storage, the separation by site, I think that's handled by the browser, because if I flip from different websites, I get different local storage, and I only
Right.
see that local storage.
Right. That's
So unless the
correct.
browser's got an issue, you shouldn't be able to access the other browser's local, the other site's local storage.
Right. And then all will be secure and happy in the world, right?
Absolutely. I mean, who ever heard of an error in a browser?
Not with my code. All right. So if there's no questions, I got some questions for you. What have we learned here today? What have you done over the last hour, and have you benefited from it? Would love to hear your
WebSockets are really
feedback.
easy to implement.
I'm sorry?
WebSockets are really easy to implement.
They are easy to implement. What else is easy to implement? What else did we cover today?
Worker threads. What was that called? Worker
Process?
Workers.
process.
Right.
I'm very intrigued with that.
That's another easy one to implement as well.
Yeah, everything you showed actually looked pretty easy, I guess, but that's kind of true if you know what you're doing, but it looked pretty straightforward, you know.
Thank you. I like to simplify things when explaining a new concept. No sense of mucking things up with a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you like the examples.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. All right. So what else did we cover today other than creative backgrounds?
Yeah. Well, you can get a message back from the server on occasion. You know, just kind of wait for the server to send you one.
And that happens with what?
Oh.
You didn't think there would be a quiz today, did you?
I'm kind of tired, so my brain's not fully at full throttle at the moment. But I'm sure one of the
I don't
other
mean to hassle you.
fellows will be able to answer that one.
So if we do a quick recap, we talked about web workers, and what that's for is essentially running processes in the background. And as we had seen, we can run multiple processes together without them stepping on each other, and we can start and stop them separate of each other. And that's for having something running in the background. Websockets, on the other hand, allowed us to have bi-directional communication, where once we open the socket, then we can have either the server or the client send multiple messages without a one-to-one response. So one could send multiples, another could send multiples. They're basically free for all after that. We also talked about server sent events, which basically the server will send a message to the client and it's one-way messaging. So if I'm waiting for a process to complete, that's a good thing to utilize so that I get notification once that process has completed. We also looked at GeoLocation, which will bring back a coordinates object that has latitude, longitude, accuracy, speed, heading, and a variety of other things as well. And it's dependent on the device that's accessing the geolocation. And web storage, which should be fresh in your memory with 2 different flavors, local as well as session storage. So local is persistent, session is not. What else did we talk about that's not listed on this slide? How can I tell if my client's browser will be capable of executing a specific feature?
Modernizer.
Modernizer.
Yeah.
And where can I go to look to see if a browser supports a specific feature?
Caniuse.com.
Caniuse.com. Thank you to whoever entered that in the chat earlier.
David. Yeah, thanks, David.
Yeah. All right. So if you're interested about learning more, this is offered as a course by NIS Technologies. Feel free to visit our website, nistechnologies.com. We also do consulting and custom application development on top of courses and teaching developers how to be better developers. Lastly, just because we're at the close of the meeting doesn't mean the conversation stops here. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, snasr@nistechnologies.com, or you can find me on Twitter, and I also invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. So thank you for attending, and like I said, if you ever have any questions that come up later, feel free to reach out to me. But thank you all for your time.
Thank you,
Okay,
Sam.
thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Yep, thank you very much. Really appreciate you presenting here today. This was really useful information, and I'm going to make every effort to use some of this soon. I'm really interested in the WebSocket and enabling that. And, but all of this sounds really useful and easy to add to our site. So appreciate your presentation. So next month, guys, we're going to have Guy Rose, who's going to be presenting on Dungeons and Dragons and graph databases. It's going to be a very interesting topic. So I'm looking forward to that. Hope to see you guys all back for that. It's going to be the first Thursday of next month. Same time, same bat channel.